Good morning. Someone in the world develops Alzheimer's disease every 6 seconds. There are 5.4 million new cases every year. There are 31 million people worldwide today, and we expect those numbers to grow exponentially over the next few years. In fact, by 2100, we believe the number of people suffering from Alzheimer's disease worldwide will be 300 million people. That's the entire population of the United States today. Total estimated costs are unbelievable. $604 billion a year. That's roughly 1% of our GDP. It's the first disease in modern history that has the potential to bankrupt sovereign nations. And in fact, it's actually worse than we ever thought it was. A recent study out of Rush University in Chicago has said that Alzheimer's disease, in fact, causes 6 times as many deaths as we thought. Those numbers would catapult Alzheimer's disease from the 6th leading cause of death in the United States to the 3rd, behind heart disease, behind breast cancer and prostate cancer, where there's actually been significant progress in the last 10 years. So what's the problem? Why are these numbers so out of control? And why aren't we making any progress? There are, in my opinion, 2 very compelling reasons. First, while there are a number of drugs that treat the symptoms of Alzheimer's disease, there are no drugs that prevent the disease from occurring or slow its progression. And it's not for lack of trying. Some of the world's largest pharmaceutical companies have tried repeatedly, but sadly continue to fail. We don't know if it's the drugs themselves. We can't actually get there because the trials are flawed. Drugs intended to prevent or slow the progression of Alzheimer's disease are being tested on people who are either too far gone or not at risk at all. You see, Alzheimer's disease is a silent killer. It lives in the brain, slowly destroying key memory centers before symptoms appear and doctors can diagnose it. And to make matters worse, not only are there no early warning signs, but there haven't been any early detection systems until now. We at Neurotrack have developed a breakthrough technology that can diagnose the disease 3 to 6 years before these symptoms appear. We use a human being's innate preference for novelty to track what's called recognition memory, which is a memory process that's housed in the hippocampus, which we know is the first area in the brain to be impacted by Alzheimer's disease. Using an infrared eye tracking device, we display a series of images over a period of about 4.5 minutes, and we track where someone is looking. We gather that data, we analyze it, and we can give a prognosis. And in fact, in just a matter of weeks, we're going to be able to do this over the web using the webcam that's in your computer monitor or an iPad. So we ran a 5-year longitudinal study that was funded by the NIH, and we got some extraordinary results. What we found was that those people who scored 50 or below on our test, 100% of them went on to convert to Alzheimer's disease. And those people who scored 67 or above, none of them converted. So you can see here in this slide 2 patients who took our test. Both patients presented clinically healthy, no signs of cognitive impairment or memory decline. The person on the left here spent the majority of time looking at what was the novel image, which is that image there on the left. The person on the right spent equal time looking at both images, the novel image and the familiar image. They couldn't differentiate between the two, and they couldn't recognize that, in fact, they had just seen the familiar image seconds beforehand. And in fact, sadly, that person went on to convert to Alzheimer's disease 3 years later. We're working with pharmaceutical companies to help them better run clinical trials, to identify people who are the right targeted people for those trials, and we're hoping that with this we can help them advance drug development and get to a therapeutic. And when that happens, we plan to be an annual screening tool for Alzheimer's and dementia. So what else is missing? I want to talk about what I think is the other extremely important issue, which is the lack of an advocacy group that is willing to get in the face of government and demand more in terms of funding and approved therapeutics. You might ask yourself, well, really, how much can an advocacy group do? Well, in the 1980s in the United States, shortly after some of the first cases of HIV were identified, a group called ACT UP formed. They were creative, a bit militant, and they weren't afraid to be demanding of their government. They did things like they shut down the FDA by throwing their bodies in the street and not allowing people to get to work. And 10 days later, after doing that, new regulations were enacted, and 1 month later, the Office of AIDS Research was established. They shut down the New York Stock Exchange to protest the fact that AZT prices were exorbitant. 5 days later, Burroughs Wellcome, which was the pharmaceutical company that was producing AZT, dramatically lowered the price. They stormed the NIH with 1,000 protesters to address the problems with clinical trials. And a month later, a massive new community trial program was rolled out throughout the country. ACT UP helped make HIV/AIDS a national priority, and they still receive more funding than most other major diseases, ahead of breast cancer, of heart disease, and you'll see there, Alzheimer's disease at the very bottom in the green line. It's even more staggering when you look at the disease in terms of funding per death. You can see that the NIH gives only just a little bit over $1,000 per Alzheimer's patient per death, whereas they give close to $350,000 per HIV/AIDS death. So this is where the power of advocacy comes in. You look at the person on the left here. This is the average demographic of a person who was impacted by HIV/AIDS. Young, strong, energetic, powerful. And on the right, this is the average person who's impacted by Alzheimer's disease. They're frail, they're older, they are losing their memory, everything from how to feed themselves, how to dress themselves. And the entire family is required to care for someone with Alzheimer's. And I can tell you from personal experience that after it's all said and done, when that person who you have cared for and loved has died, you just want to put it behind you. You're exhausted and you're devastated, and the last thing you want to do is go out and march in the streets. So we need to mobilize for them because it's the right thing to do, and because even if that's not a compelling reason for you, because at some point we will all be impacted by this disease. By the time someone reaches the age of 85, 50% of people will have Alzheimer's. So I think, like Max has said, and so many others before me have said, we're at a really important time in history. More people have access to technology. More people are comfortable using technology. And now, with Neurotrack, we have a technological tool that can diagnose the disease years before symptoms appear, making it possible to intervene therapeutically and make a difference. Now, I think what we need is for people to stand up and say, I'm going to do something about Alzheimer's disease. I'm going to hold my government accountable, and I'm going to demand more funding for treatment and research. At Neurotrack, we want to harness our technology to help crowdsource, that's a big word this morning, a cure, and we're looking for partners to help. We're organizing what we hope to be the largest online clinical trial. And we also, as part of that, we want to create a public groundswell of activity to push governments, particularly my own, to increase funding for research and for treatment, to fast-track approval of those treatments and diagnostic tools. And with this trial, we also want to collect massive amounts of data. Data that's generated by our tests, data that's generated by our partners' tests, And we want to make that anonymized data open to researchers and scientists worldwide to see what they can do with it, to see how we can use it to improve the state of this disease. So I hope you'll go to our website when we're ready with that webcam test, which is just a matter of weeks away, that you'll take our test, you'll donate your data, you'll spread the word, you'll talk to your government, you'll get in their face, you'll demand more, and we'll actually be able to do something about Alzheimer's disease. I hope that everyone in this room recognizes, just by virtue of being here today, that you shouldn't ever underestimate your ability to make a difference and to make a change. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Elli. How should we change our behavior if we are going to put off this thing that's going to hit a lot of us? Are you changing your diets? Are you changing your behavior?
You know, I mean, so one of the big issues that we always hear is, without a treatment, who wants to find out that they have this disease? You know, because it's seemingly there's very little that you can do. One thing we know is that exercise plays a huge role in helping to stave off symptoms. So you can start exercising, and I would encourage everyone to get up and massively change the way they conduct their lives and exercise more. There are things that you can do with your diet. We know that if, in fact, you do get an early diagnosis, there are some off-label prescriptions that you can take. But there's not much, and I think that all of this work needs to go to really create a treatment that's effective as a progressive, as a cure or a disease-modifying therapeutic.
Well, thank you for helping us join the fight.
Thank you very
Thanks
much
a lot.
for having me.